All right, hey guys, today we are going to go over lesson 211 from our book, and we will be covering a couple different learning goals. The first one is we're going to be able to define what a variable is. The second one is we are going to be able to simplify expressions and write an expression. And our third goal is to remember algebra tiles, how to name them, and what they represent. So those are kind of our learning goals. So the first thing that we're going to start with is trying to remember what is a variable. So if you kind of think back, can you remember where did we use variables and when did we use variables last year? So kind of think a little bit. Do you think you know what a variable is? All right, so a variable is actually a letter or a symbol that can be used to represent an unknown. So when we don't know something, last year, if we didn't know something, we would usually call it X, or you could call it Y or K. You can call it anything you want, as long as you know what it stands for. So a lot of times when we were solving story problems, we used variables. Okay, when we were working with algebra tiles, we also used variables quite a bit. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to start with. So we're going to review what were those algebra tiles that we used and how did we use them. All right, so the first thing we want to review is there are a couple different kinds of algebra tiles. So the first tile that we used quite a bit was the 1 tile. We called that kind of a unit tile. Now, the reason we called that is because each of the sides we just said measured 1. So all the way around the outside measures 1 on those unit tiles. Okay, now last year in the book, we when we were drawing these out on paper, we used if it was shaded in, it was positive 1. If it was not shaded in, it was a negative 1. Okay, so all these ones that I have on my paper here, those are all positive ones. So that was the unit tile, and we named it by its area, because if you guys think, what's 1 times 1? What's the area of this little square? It's 1, so that's why we call it the 1 tile. So those algebra tiles, we named them by their area. Okay, so the next tile that we ended up having was this X tile over here. Okay, and do you remember how we figured out the name for this X tile? Okay, so what we did is we took, if you guys kind of look down here at the bottom again, we looked at the top across this tile, and we could see that it measured the same as the 1 tile here. So we knew across the top it was 1 long. We didn't know how long it was across the side here, so we had to come up for a name with that. Since we didn't know it, we called it X. So across the 2 sides, we called that length X. Across the top here, we knew it was 1. So when we were trying to name the tile, we thought, well, we got to do the area. So again, we have this tile here. It's 1 by X, so to find the area, we do X times 1, which is the same as X. So that's why we called it the X tile. So if you look up here, this would be a positive X tile because it's shaded in, but again, the length here is X, this is 1. All right, so now if we wanted to, I'm going to kind of, let me erase. So now let's look at this group of tiles we have up here. How would we name this group of tiles? Do you remember from last year? Because how you name it, that's called an expression. When you kind of put a bunch of variables together, it's called an expression or expressions. So if we looked at this, okay, kind of look, I have 2X tiles, so I could write 2X plus I have a 1, and a 1, that's 3 of them, so plus 3. So that would be the expression for those tiles. All right, so again, we have our X tiles and our 1 tiles. Now, we also could have our negative X tiles if it wasn't shaded in. I could draw the same thing. We also could have our negative 1 tiles right next to it, not shaded in. All right, so our next tiles that we had were the X squared tiles. Okay, so now you might be kind of thinking, now how did we get the name X squared? So if you take a look at this length going across here, you can see my arrow moving. Okay, and the length, the width going across here, you can see that that's the same as how long the X tile was. So we could write that this was X long and X wide. So actually it's X going all the way around the outside. So then when we were trying to name this tile, we thought, well, we have to do the area. So if I'm doing the area of this, it's X times X, length times width. Now, when I'm thinking about this, X times X, that's the same as writing X squared. Because think if I was doing let's do 4 times 4. I could rewrite that as 4 squared. So it's the same with the X. X times X is X squared. So when we have this tile here, again, across the side it's X, across the top it's X, all the way around it's X. but we call it the x squared tile. All right, another tile that we had we didn't use very much last year was kind of a little bit longer tile, and I'm just going to kind of draw this out. And this is called the Y tile, so if I kind of shaded it in, I'm just going to write a Y. All right, so if you kind of think about it, how long is it kind of going across the top and the bottom? If I kind of put one of those tiles up there, well, I know it's 1 going across the top and bottom. Now, I didn't know how long it was across the sides, so I need to give it a name. Since I don't know how long it is, I can call it a variable, and I'm going to choose Y as my variable. So across the sides, it'd be Y. So again, I have my Y tile. It's longer than the X tile when you're drawing it out. So I know it's 1 by 1 by 1, and then Y across each of the side. I want it to be positive, so I'm shading it in. So now when I named it, if I did the area, 1 times Y is the same as Y. So that's why it's called the Y tile. Now you can also have the negative Y tile if you just draw it, not shade it in. Now the same thing that we did with the X tile, if we want to, if you want to draw kind of a big one of it, what do you think the name of that would be? So let's say you could line a Y tile up here, a Y tile across the top. What do you think we would name this big rectangle? Again, if it was shaded in too. Well, to do the area, Y times Y would give me Y squared. So this would be the Y squared tile. All right, now there's one other kind of type of tile that we're going to be using this year that we didn't see last year, and it's called the XY tile. Now you're going to be able to kind of see why it's called that. So this one length right here, that my pen's going down, that's the same as how long the X tile was, so we can call that length X. Okay, now this other length, the longer length, that was the same as the Y tile, so then I can call that Y. So then if I want to name this tile, this green tile I have here, I have to do the area, so X times Y, length times width, which is the same as XY. Okay, you don't have to put that dot in between there. So this would be called the XY tile. All right, so now that we know some of the names of the tiles, let's kind of go through and see if we can write an expression for to name these tiles. All right, so this first one, I want to kind of simplify this. Remember the word simplify? Kind of means like put stuff together, whatever you can put together. So let's kind of look. So I always kind of look for the like terms, the ones that are kind of alike. So if you look here, we have a negative one and a positive one. Do you guys remember from last year that makes a 0 pair? That equals 0 together. So cancel that out. Okay, do you see anything else you could cancel? All right, we have a positive x and a negative x. Those make 0. All right, it doesn't look like there's anything else to cancel. So now I'm going to have to name this. So I'm going to kind of start with what I have. Well, I have an x squared and an x squared. That's the same as writing 2 of them. I have 2x squareds. Plus, so I'm done with those. I have one of these y squared, so I can just write plus y squared. Plus, I got a couple of these negative 2x's. So I'm just going to come down here, plus negative 2x. And then plus, I have just one tile. All right, so I kind of wrote that out. I could write it up here a little smaller. 2x squared plus y squared plus negative 2x plus 1. So that would be an expression for these algebra tiles. All right, let's do more. Okay, so if you look at this one, let's see, what do we think would be the name of this expression if you were going to name this? Okay, so the first thing that I notice is I could cancel out a positive 1 and a negative 1 tile. That makes 0 together. And then I see a positive y and a negative y. That equals 0 together. Okay, so now I can name it. It looks like I have 2 of these xy's. Remember, don't write it with the time sign, just put xy. So if I have 2 of those, I'm going to write 2xy plus, let's see what else I have. Oh, I just have one normal x, plus, looks like I just have one of those other tiles. So that would be the expression that represents this set of algebra tiles. All right, so we went over algebra tiles, a quick little review, and we went over what a variable was and expressions. So you'll continue on the next lesson with some more algebra tiles.